Joining me now to react, Harris Zafar, national spokesperson for Ahmadiyya Muslim Community USA, and author of Demystifying Islam, Tackling the Tough Questions. Sir, thank you very much for being here. Let me get you to respond to the last point I was just talking to Andy McCarthy about the fact that Hamas is actually using civilians to hide its weaponry, its rockets, and that accounts for many of the civilian deaths we've seen thus far.
Well, Megyn, the contention that the victims have themselves to blame for their indiscriminate targeted murder is not only insensitive, it's dangerous and myopic. Look, the political struggle for control over a stateless society is complicated, and it has indeed yielded a very powerful group in Hamas. And yes, they commit nefarious acts. And yes, those acts must be condemned. But no, they do not embody the ambitions or the desires of a subjugated and an occupied people who have largely only ever seen war, which is why the rhetoric of Mr.
Palestinians elect Hamas? Hamas was elected. They run Gaza. The Palestinians chose them. And now it's a united government. And so people look at Hamas and say they are the Palestinians and the Palestinians are Hamas.
And that's why Mr. McCarthy is surprisingly dismissive of that argument, because that's exactly 100%, Megyn, the argument that was made from Osama bin Laden, that you elected your president, you elected your people in authority in the United States, so you as Americans have forfeited the rights to be considered protected civilians, which is why we'll attack you. It's exactly the same thing. So we cannot lower our standards to take the same stance of a known terrorist who we all wanted to be removed.
The United States doesn't have in its Constitution a stated mission of destroying another country. I mean, the Hamas charter specifically says all Israelis must die.
Megyn, instead of what Mr. McCarthy has argued, which is we need to, at the end of the day, win against Hamas, the bottom line is, what is our goal? I would argue that our goal is supposed to be to establish peace. And that's why we have to understand killing children.
But let me get
that.
Hold on.
Killing children is not going to establish peace anywhere. So when we say that we want to win, it's not a win-lose. This is about protecting peace in that society.
Okay, I get that. But listen, but the point I was trying to make with him is that the United States, our government, says that Hamas is a terrorist group. And when you read the Hamas charter, you understand why. I mean, they sound worse than Adolf Hitler in terms of what they want to do to the Jews and to the Israeli state. So why wouldn't we want to see our ally, Israel, defeat Hamas? Why would we want to call a truce in the middle of a war that Israel appears to be winning?
How are we trying to, quote unquote, and to use your words and Mr. McCarthy's and the rhetoric of Mr. Rosenbaum, win? If you're winning by causing incredibly large amounts of civilian casualties, you can't hide behind this term collateral damage. We have to call it what it is. It's murder. Over 500 people, 75% of which, Megyn, are civilians. That's not winning a war, which is why probably the United Nations High Commissioner of Human Rights has said that Israel is teetering on the brink of war crimes and violating international.
The UN has its thumb on the scale.
Well, everyone has its own views, but the bottom line is, how are we protecting innocent human lives? And as the Ahmadiyya Muslim community, as Muslims who believe in that Messiah, under the divine leadership of the Caliph, His Holiness Mirza Masroor Ahmad, our call is to protect human lives. And you're not going to do that with the view of winning.
Let me ask you very quickly before I go, because it's very well documented that Hamas is using places like kindergartens, schools, places that are otherwise safe and normally are used to house children, to shield its weaponry and from which to launch rocket attacks. I mean, how is Hamas not to blame for those civilian deaths?
I think you'll remember in the beginning of this conversation I said that indeed Hamas has committed nefarious attacks and they need to be condemned. I'm not here as a pro-Hamas advocate. You know that, Megyn. And so what I'm here to say is both sides, I'm a religious man, both sides have violated the laws of their own faith. And so we can't continue to defend one side versus the other. We have to admit that where both sides are committing mistakes, and we have to say that the disproportionate response that we've seen from one side to the other is wholly unjust. But both sides are at fault, and both need to protect human lives. That's the only way we're going to get peace. Peace is with justice. It's not with wars. You're not going to get peace by killing more children.
Harris, thank you.
Thank you, Megyn.